Listen, my advice to Keir Starmer is to stop being an idiot because, listen, Keir Starmer and half of the cabinet voted against President Trump's state visit last time round.
Keir Starmer got called out by Suella on live TV for his idiotic decision to break relations with Trump.
The numbers out today are simply astonishing. Here we go again. The lunatics have taken control of the asylum system. They said they'd take control of our borders, and they've utterly and abjectly and provably failed.
While America's on track to prosper, Starmer and his insane cronies are turning Britain into a nightmare.
It's time to make Britain great again. Enough talking and intellectual head-scratching. We know it can be done. Just look at what's going on in America. President Trump has got more done in 5 days than Labour has in 6 months.
Order immediately halted all entry of illegal.
Donald Trump humiliated Starmer by exposing him to be an incompetent and useless leader in front of the whole world.
Suella, what do you think Trump's inauguration means for the UK?
I think it means a huge amount. This is a real turning point for the Americans on secure borders, a sound economy, cutting inflation, an end to the woke diversity, inclusion, nonsense that's taken over their military and their public institutions. And from a UK perspective, we must be able to absorb some of this changing trend and culture that will be led by the Americans under President Trump.
Donald Trump's back in business, and the idiot Starmer could learn a thing or two from his amazing progress.
We need to deport as many illegal migrants as is physically possible. I deported several thousand when I was Home Secretary. We need to ramp up those numbers because if you come to the UK illegally, you must not have the right to stay. You should be detained and swiftly removed. And that's why we do need to learn again from the Americans about their robust, unapologetic stance to border control.
The immigration crisis in Britain will shatter everything if we don't start deporting them soon.
Do you think the Tory party can learn from Donald Trump's victory in November? Do you think the Tory party should become more like the MAGA party?
I think there are a lot of parallels that we should draw from the MAGA movement when it comes to UK Conservatives. For too many years, we were, a centrist, vanilla puddle in the Conservative Party. We oversaw record immigration, we oversaw high taxation, and we...
Labour's hopelessly incompetent, but the Tories can turn things around and make Britain great again.
And what's your advice to Keir Starmer as he engages with the new Trump presidency?
Listen, my advice to Keir Starmer is to stop being an idiot because, listen, Keir Starmer and half of the cabinet voted against President Trump's state visit last time round. We've got so many of members of the cabinet, David Landry notably, having carried out vitriolic and ridiculous personal attacks on Donald Trump. They're all now desperately trying to backtrack and they're all desperately trying to suck up to President Trump.
Suella slams Starmer for being a massive idiot who's ruining our future over petty politics.
But at worst, they have done great harm to the UK's national interest. So they've got to grow up, stop playing petty student politics, and actually stand up for the UK, get a free trade agreement, work on ensuring our military and security agreements are robust, and learn the lessons of how Donald Trump is securing their border for a start.
Starmer and his cronies are immature toddlers, and unless they put British interest over their sinister agenda, we're doomed.
And it may well be that there are tariffs imposed by the US on Chinese goods. The UK-US relationship is very different to that. We have much more collaboration and there's much more of a brotherhood between the US and the UK. I think a threat of tariffs on EU nations will be used to try and extract better action and more commitments, for example, on defence spending.
If Trump ends up imposing tariffs on British goods, our already crumbling economy will collapse.
What do you make of Reform and Nigel Farage?
Well, listen, Reform have caused us a lot of pain, and Reform have been set up in a very short space of time, and they've achieved a huge amount of success. Got to hand it to them. And we lost over 100 of our MPs because of Reform. So we can't dismiss Reform. It would be foolish for Conservatives to be complacent about Reform. I think Reform is here to stay.
Unlike the tone-deaf and idiotic Labour, Suella and the Tories aren't afraid to admit their shortcomings and improve improve.
I'm one of, I think, maybe one of the only Conservative MPs who publicly came out and supported Donald Trump earlier this year, much to the dismay of some of my colleagues, actually, because I really believe in the power and the good that he can bring for the USA, for foreign policy, importantly, and for the world. So I know what I believe. I'm a big fan of Donald Trump's and the Republicans, and it's just an honour to be here and part of the celebrations today.
Suella isn't afraid to admit her support for Trump, and for good reason. Unlike the shambolic Starmer, Trump has gotten things done in record time. We've seen 6 months of this Labour government, and still, everything is a huge mess and they've failed to deliver on every single promise that they made. Trump, on the other hand, has made some huge decisions that have left the entire world in shock. On top of that, Starmer and his gang are shivering because the public isn't accepting any stupid excuses anymore. America has gotten a grip on the illegal immigration crisis within weeks, and guess what Starmer is doing?
UK's population is set to rise to 72.5 million by mid-2032. Incredible figures. Look at that. It's like an Elon Musk rocket taking off. The projection released by the Office for National Statistics today is driven almost entirely, in fact, it is entirely by net migration, with a 5 million increase in the next 10 years. But that's actually 10 million coming in and 5 million going out, with births and deaths basically on parity.
The immigration situation in the United Kingdom has been nothing short of disastrous in every way possible. Our economy, welfare, social structure, crime rates, and future have all been jeopardized by this uncontrolled and unsustainable open border policy that Starmer seems to be running. On top of all that, he keeps promising that he'll fix things with his smashing the gangs plans, but so far, things have only been a monumental failure. The population is rising at a staggering rate, and we do not have the growth or development to match that.
Because I think part of the problem here is a political class that simply doesn't have the courage to do the right thing for the United Kingdom. Every single sane-minded individual in this country knows we've got to put up our borders. We will cease to be a country if we don't do it.
At the end of the day, there's a very obvious solution to this problem, and Trump is already making it happen. So why is Starmer and his gang failing? Well, firstly, they're too tone-deaf and delusional to the point where they don't even consider immigration to be a problem. It's all part of their socialist agenda that loves multiculturalism. Secondly, Starmer is simply too much of a coward to take the strict actions that we need. Our borders are being breached, and you'd assume that this idiotic government would try to take action, but they're either too incompetent, stupid, or afraid.
55% of British people want a border emergency called to shut down our borders, detain and deport people who are in this country illegally. 76% of Reform and Tory voters want that to be implemented. That was in the Telegraph, as I say. Yes, I see Christopher quickly fact-checking me, but it's true. And that's what the people want. But the political class isn't there. And
what does it tell you about the priorities of this government when they're not even listening to the majority of the public? Everyone is slowly agreeing that we need to shut our borders down and bring this insane amount of immigration in control. If they come illegally, send them back. It isn't as complicated as Starmer makes it sound, and at this point he's just making excuses to cover up his inaction. As we stand, there are no deterrents to stop these illegal immigrants, and that's something Starmer can learn from Donald Trump. Make no mistake, the longer this problem continues, the more our very identity and society deteriorates.
so when you talk about the cultural changes taking place, it's much bigger. It's more like 10 million. And that 10 million means you've got population replacement taking place. British cultural values are being set aside. Our nation is changing in a way that we couldn't begin to recognize it. And we're not moving forward as an integrated, settled, homogeneous culture or country.
Starmer and his gang are importing millions of immigrants and letting the illegal ones stay at our expense. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that the public is outraged by the fact. However, to make matters worse, there have been no efforts whatsoever to try and make them integrate into British society. They're ignoring our values and sticking to their own, and that obviously causes a massive clash. The culture that they're bringing from their countries, like Iran, are more often than not completely against what British values are. If they can't love and support our culture, then maybe they shouldn't stay here.
And we saw how brilliantly Trump, on his first day, one of the first things he did, apart from saying the obvious that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. What is our world come to when the President of the United States has to say that at his inauguration speech? But the next best thing he did was to get rid of affirmative action, progressive discrimination, this whole DEI nonsense. And DEI, coupled with this rampant immigration that we've got, is going to be the end of this country.
Right off the bat, Donald Trump is bringing common sense back into the Western world, and that's making Starmer seethe. The entire Labour Party is whining about Trump because he's actively against their hidden woke agenda. Unfortunately for Labour, they can't do anything about it because a useless leader like Starmer doesn't stand the slightest chance against Trump. Labour is bending over backwards and accepting whatever demands Trump is making, and that just might be a good thing for the British public.
So, I mean, there are a number of things we can do. Suella Braverman, when she first drafted the Illegal Migration Act, when it was a bill, it required the Secretary of State to detain and then deport. When it became an act, it actually the Secretary of State has the option to detain and deport. Now, they're two very different sets of wording, and the first wording was the correct wording, and we should have gone with it.
The fact of the matter remains that Starmer and the Labour Party are just beating around the bush. This is pure Starmerism at display, where they make huge promises and then try to weasel their way out of delivering on them. Suella and the Tories had the right idea to detain and deport anyone who illegally came to our country, but guess what happened? Starmer and his woke lefties have opposed every single tough measure against illegal immigration, and that just shows how out of touch with reality they are. Solving this crisis isn't rocket science, Trump is doing it, and you wouldn't believe how easily he's winning.
Trump has secured a major victory in his ongoing battle against illegal immigration. What am I talking about? Well, the Colombian government, initially resistant to accepting deportation flights, has now offered up its own presidential plane, talking about winning, to facilitate the return of illegal migrants. Now, this breakthrough came after a tense but pretty brief standoff between the two nations.
Unlike Starmer, Donald Trump had the guts to stand up to the entire world and announce that enough is enough. America will no longer tolerate this woke nonsense and flood their country with illegal immigrants that end up doing more harm than good. He faced off against the Colombian president who thought he could act tough and refused Trump's plans. And now, the Colombians are sending their own planes to do Trump's bidding. That's how a leader with resolve and conviction operates. But how did he manage to make the Colombians agree?
He stated, "I deny the entry of American planes carrying Colombian migrants into our territory," particularly he was aggrieved over the use of military planes, but guess what? Trump is having none of it. He threatened Colombia with a series of punitive measures, including a 25% tariff on all goods coming into the US from Colombia. That would jump to 50% after just 1 week. He also implemented a travel ban and visa revocations for the Colombian government, government officials and their allies and supporters.
What happened next just shows how powerful America is and how they used their dominance to make others bend to their will. While this might sound extreme, it was completely necessary, and the best part is, the United Kingdom is a force to be reckoned with as well. We can do the same if Starmer finally gets his head out of the sand. It didn't take 6 months for Trump to make this happen. In fact, he did it faster than Starmer could come up with more excuses in Parliament.
Colombian administration very quickly, and I mean within a matter of hours, changed its tune. In a statement released while under pressure, the government announced, "The government of Colombia, under the direction of President Gustavo Petro, has arranged the presidential plane to facilitate the dignified return of the compatriots." Yeah, that is right. They are using their own plane to help Trump take these migrants. What kind of win is that? I'd say that's 100% victory for the White House. They will be screaming about this for weeks.
On the other hand, there's a growing fear that Trump might hit us with the same tariffs as well. The reason being this idiotic Labour government that's trying to break relations with Trump instead of working closely with him. At this point, Britain needs America as its ally, but Trump might not tolerate Starmer for long. The entire Labour Party is abusive and openly hostile towards Trump, but the good news is that they're changing their tune. Seeing the threat of tariffs and the huge backlash from the British public, Starmer is beginning to behave and suck up to Trump. Britain might end up adopting America's plan to tackle illegal immigration simply because it works.
Now, Trump's aggressive stance on immigration is already having far-reaching consequences across Latin America. Many countries in the region are already grappling with their own economic challenges and political instability. So guess what? The threat of severe US sanctions is not going to help that, and they're noticing it, and they're noticing it quickly. The Colombian case serves as a warning to these nations and to those migrants considering crossing the border that if they make that journey, they are incredibly likely now to be turned around.
Trump simply introduced a huge deterrent to the equation. If the countries don't comply and help control their illegal immigrants, they'll have to suffer the huge economic consequences that Trump's tariffs would bring. And since no country's leaders in the world are stupid enough to clobber their own economy, except Starmer and Rachel Reeves, they end up agreeing. Now compare that to what Starmer did. Like an utter buffoon, he scrapped the Rwanda deterrent and started housing migrants in luxury hotels. Did he really think that would stop them? The pressure's mounting and Starmer's being forced to fix relations with Trump now.
After nearly a week of silence between Trump and Sir Keir Starmer, they have finally picked up the phone and had a chat with each other. It took almost 7 days, but here we are. Now, the delay in communication was starting to raise eyebrows because traditionally we enjoy a close relationship with the US, or at least in theory. We always talk about the special relationship. It was reported that Trump had already spoken with leaders from China, Saudi Arabia, even El Salvador before contacting the British Prime Minister.
The entire world was laughing at us about how stupid Starmer is. Make no mistake, we would have been significantly weakened if we lost America as a close ally. On top of that, the tariffs would have made life in Britain a total nightmare. Imagine the insane increase in inflation and overall cost of living that would bring. Coupled with Rachel Reeves' greedy tax raids, the working class would have been clobbered. Now, Starmer's backtracking and sucking up to Trump, and we can only hope that it's not too late.
Very keen to highlight UK's deregulation efforts to boost growth, and we've seen the Chancellor Rachel Reeves make similar noises over the last couple of days. Obviously they've realised that 6 months of talking down the economy and saying things can only get worse isn't very good for investor confidence. It's not very good for the economy. Who knew? But nonetheless, good to see. I will say perhaps the most significant outcome of the call was the agreement for the two leaders to meet soon. This hasn't happened yet.
On the call with Donald Trump, Starmer finally had a good idea for once in his life and talked rather optimistically about the British economy. Instead of being gloomy and depressing, he highlighted the potential that we have for real growth. Now, Trump might see that as an opportunity to invest, and the possibility of a beneficial trade deal for us is looking quite real. There's a tiny sliver of hope that Starmer might stop being an idiot and make Britain great again.
It's time to make Britain great again. Enough talking and intellectual head-scratching. We know it can be done. Just look at what's going on in America. President Trump has got more done in 5 days than Labour has in 6 months.
Order immediately halted all entry of illegal border crossers, of which there were many, and began promptly returning the illegal trespassers back to the place from which they came.
Look at that. A sight to behold.
Every single thing that the British public despises about Labour's toxic socialist agenda has been scrapped in America. Trump made a total fool out of this entire Labour government by doing what Starmer couldn't do in 6 whole months. If anything, this is proof that if Starmer really wanted to solve these crises, he would have by now. Or, at the very least, the nation would have been on the right track by now. However, we're seeing the opposite of progress. It's not just the immigration issue either. Trump is targeting everything the woke left stands for.
Meanwhile, President Trump has totally torn up the net zero scam.
I terminated the ridiculous and incredibly wasteful Green New Deal. I call it the Green New Scam. Withdrew from the one-sided Paris Climate Accord.
Petrol and diesel cars back on the menu in America. Trump's also getting rid of wind turbines and solar farms.
We've been hearing the government screech about green energy for months now. They've been wasting our taxpayer money on these useless and frankly ridiculous policies while continuing to tax us at an insane rate. This idiotic agenda has taken over the entire world, but America is breaking free. Trump is trashing all of those nonsense plans, and if Starmer had any sense, he would do the same.
The Chancellor today said Britain needs a dose of Trump's positivity and said it was time we learned something from the US President. No, really? Goodness me, who'd have thought? Putting Britain first. What a great idea from Rachel Reeves, very original. This was Donald Trump's bullish first speech as president.
During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first.
A bit too late for them to realize this, but better late than never. The only question now is whether or not the insecure Starmer will get out of Fantasyland and actually learn something from Trump. This might be the last chance that Labour has to turn things around and regain the public trust. However, the odds of that happening are rather slim. The public is furious and the pressure seems to be getting to the terrified Starmer.
What a stark contrast. Donald Trump already has migrants on planes. Sir Keir Starmer's still blathering on about smashing gangs, yet the boats keep coming, of course. And though Labour have pledged to work with foreign countries to increase security and tackle the gangs and so on, blah, 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 a number of claimants have been rejected. So Rachel Reeves can talk all she wants about copying Trump and needing positivity. The real results come from when you actually stop the yapping and just get on with it.
It's about time that Labour started talking less and doing more. The Brits are exhausted of their endless promises, and at this point, nobody trusts them anymore. All we've seen so far are broken promises and disgusting betrayals of the public trust. Starmer and his gang have been so shameless and disgraceful that they've been putting Britain last on their list of priorities.
President Trump has signed hundreds of executive orders this week to make America great again, but what he's achieved most in just 5 days is providing absolute proof that the problems plaguing the Western world, Britain included, are political choices made by our leaders, not some inevitable outcome that we must all suffer in lockstep. We're locked in a battle for the future of this country, its very soul and fabric of being. So let's amp up the positivity, use America as a blueprint for change, and make Britain great again.
Remember how Starmer warned us that things will get worse before they get better? Well, all of that was nothing more than a shameless lie, because Starmer does not have the spine to stand up for the British public and take the actual tough decisions that need to be taken. This government is choosing to not take proper action, and Trump's success is putting them to shame.
What's your thoughts? Donald Trump is making it look easy.
I think, well, there's making it look easy and there's making it easy, which are two different things, and Paul has given a nod to that. But the one thing he has done is he gets things done. Now, it doesn't matter really at the moment exactly what they are, but what we are suffering from in this country is not getting things done. That's the comparison. If you look at the faith we've lost in some of our institutions, particularly lately, and there have been inquiries, there have been policies in place, but we haven't followed them.
It doesn't matter if Trump is making things look easy or not. At the end of the day, he's doing the job that he was given by the American public. While Starmer is running around like a scared rat, Trump is getting things done, and that's what the British public is demanding right now. We need a leader with conviction and a vision, someone who can back their words with action. Still, there might be some hope now that the public outrage is forcing Starmer to listen. It's time to make Britain great again, and the only way to do that is to put more pressure on the idiot Starmer. That's something you can help out with by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.